I mean, look, I kind of got into the game very early on, where it was still quite novel. I reflect back on Monati Fellows, a business I started when I was at Wits. And it was effectively in the beginning a research business. So we were trying to collect data on young people, and we're trying to find basically more efficient ways to do it. And yeah, so we started out, in the business trying to effectively find more cost-efficient ways to do what the big guys were doing and to do it a lot quicker. So when we were running Monati Fellows, we used to do, closed user group polls and, manage kind of focus groups in these closed user groups on Facebook, when back then it wasn't really a thing. And for us, it was just trying to find efficiencies. And that became the core of kind of my appreciation and understanding of technology. I went on, obviously, to start working in bigger technology environments, fortunately. We had our hand at trying to develop apps and build products at Monati Fellows stage, one of which was a disaster called Stupid Questions. But early days of trying to build tech that allowed us to, get questions from young people and give them data as an example, or airtime in return. So that's kind of where it all started, in trying to understand how we get better efficiencies from using technology, but seemingly continue to solve problems that our business was having. And fortunately, that evolved, from simply almost playing around with solutions to me, fortunately, being in organizations like Nedbank, where I was looking after kind of big projects that had to do with, the website as an example, social media, app development, et cetera, which effectively was the enterprise view, right? So you've gone from tinkering around with certain apps and small things. Now you're in this big organization, and you have to, number one, educate everybody about how this world is changing. Number two, develop stuff as you go along. Number three, talk about new media and how does YouTube work within a banking context? What can we not say? What can we say? Who creates the content? Who owns the, all of those conversations were being I had very early on when I was at Nedbank. And then to global technology, which was Facebook. Facebook was phenomenal, for a number of reasons, but it was also, a leap kind of into a world where you kind of go from a very traditional space, which is Nedbank, into this like global technology space, where things move quickly, where changes are happening rapidly. You're working with people that are different from you, that don't look like you, that do things, in completely different ways, but are brilliant at what they do. And so my pre was kind of going through this full circle of almost trying out technology and playing with things, to seeing how it works at scale, to seeing how it works when it's, kind of global, and appreciating that that's kind of where the world is going. That's the way of the future. So my appreciation is how to bring all of that knowledge and expertise into my current roles. And when we started Bridge Labs, we want to figure out a way to start design thinking and developing tools and technology, and having the expertise to actually build the things and then take them to market. So it's kind of come full circle from, small business tinkering around, startup vibes, to like medium company, to big corporate, big global technology. And now I feel like I'm back in my lane again, working as an entrepreneur. So Bridge Labs is a design thinking and software engineering business. We build products and technologies, and we take them to market. And secondly, we partner with kind of forward-thinking institutions who may not have great technology expertise, but have great products or services, and we help partner with them to take those to market. So effectively, it's a think tank of engineers, African engineers. So our team is fortunately all African engineers, as well as some commercial team members that are all African. The idea is to try and have people that are got proximity to the problems we're trying to solve. And typically they tend to be young, and typically they tend to be extremely intelligent kids. So it's really awesome to work with bright young minds. And so far, we've been running for about 4 years, which has been great. And we're starting to see a lot of dividends pay off with our strategy, because we chose not to go down the route of becoming a fintech or an ed tech or a martech or whatever. We focused on building software engineering capability, and the importance of that is we can then deploy it in whatever sector, whatever industry that we want to. We also then get a lot of reusability as far as getting our young engineers and our teams to think differently about products and development of products, what it means over a long period of time, how you commercialize it, et cetera, et cetera. So those are all the things that are really close to our hearts, but that's what Bridge Labs does in a nutshell. Yeah, look, I think a lot of it is converging, right? And I think it's converging on kind of the central intersection point. If you think about all the pieces of the puzzle, is on creativity. And so the convergence point is about how businesses will be seeking out more creative solutions going forward. That creative solution may interpret itself into an advertising or marketing solution, it may interpret itself into technology builds, it may interpret itself into behavioral design thinking type. So it may interpret in different ways. I think the place where it overlaps is we're seeing it all moving into the creative consulting space. We've seen that the big companies like the Deloittes, like the KPMGs, like the PwCs are all making a gun for the marketing comms industry because they understand consulting, but they're missing the creativity piece. So I think that all of it is going to kind of start converging. And the guys who get really good about understanding how to problem solve within the context of corporate and design creative solutions that fit those problems are the ones that are going to win. And be uncomfortable with the fact that the solution may not necessarily be anything that you're good at, but it may mean that you can bring other people in to solve the problem. And that's a more holistic view on trying to help create value and solve problems, especially for corporates in this day and age. No. No, the answer is no. You know, and I wish it was otherwise. I'm seeing that there's a lot of activity, right? And when I say activity, is that we're seeing younger people more capable coming into the spaces and occupying environments previously where we weren't there, right? So I'm seeing that there's a permeation now of slightly more diverse talent groups that are occupying the spaces. And that's not necessarily a function of diversity. It's a function of how the economy is developing, right? And you can't avoid the fact that Black people were previously a minority consideration and now a majority consideration. So the numbers tell you you're going to have more Black people in these businesses. What we're not seeing is transformation in terms of the ownership. So if you look at all these businesses that are employing these young, hopeful, young, Black and talented and diverse people, who are they owned by? And that's where, for me, the indicator is around whether the transformation is happening or not. And if you use that as your measure, it is absolutely not happening, right? And so it's a big challenge because we all know that the reality of a lot of agencies, digital and otherwise, is that they've been pretty much trying to hack the system for the last couple of years. The ACA put out recommendations on transformation. It's happening from a compliance perspective. The pressure is being applied from bigger clients, but everybody's just trying to find a hack around it. How do we not transform and how do we maintain the status quo? And for as long as that's a psyche, we're not going to see the transformation accelerating. In fact, it's a grudge purchase. For those that own the businesses, that have made the investment, have to think about what it means now. To now, obviously, you have to feel as though I have to bring people into this process without an appreciation of the value. You're not going to get it right. So my view is either A, you be aggressive about the acquisition of these assets and participation on economic terms that make sense. And it's difficult because a lot of people don't have balance sheets to make those investments. You don't have the network to leverage to be able to buy these things. Or you're going to be starting your own businesses, which I'm seeing a little bit more energy, a little bit more upspring about. But even that is difficult. You know, you're taking creatives, you're taking people who, whose skill is not building commercial enterprise, and you are forcing them to start a business. Now, they were great as an art director, as a planner, as a strategist, which is awesome. Now you tell them start a business. That's a fundamentally different set of skills. And we are not encouraging people to work together to try and bridge that gap. So I mean, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about this. And so transformation is not happening, not at the rate it should. And where we are encouraging young people to get into these spaces, there's insufficient support, not only from others within the sector and the industry. There's insufficient structured support from the marketing and advertising industry as a whole, and there's insufficient support from government. So I think it's a challenging space to be, but my view is that's the lay of the land right now. There's a few different things to be considered in answering that question. The first is the growth of e-commerce was always going to be directly proportionate to access and price of data, right? So there was an infrastructure consideration and there's a data consideration. Now, from all indications, we're increasing our access to more affordable data. It has been slow and it has been painful, but there are breakthroughs in relation to how much data is being able to be made more affordable in South Africa. It is still quite expensive, right? The reality is there is only one way it can go. It can't get more expensive. So my view is that in the short to the medium term, we're going to see a more increased accessibility by virtue of the fact that data is going to get cheaper. Now, if you look at the stats relating to how people have been behaving during COVID-19, there's definitely been a shift towards e-commerce platforms for obvious reasons. It's also been the only alternative that you have for obvious reasons. And therefore, that behavior has been kind of now inculcated in certain people, and I think it's going to continue to stay. The challenge is that that still represents probably less than 5 or 10% of the population. So your growth is off a small base, which means you'll get big growth numbers, but your starting base was small. And so the question is, how do you translate that to the middle and to the bottom, so that the growth rate is then a real economic opportunity across the board? And I think there's still a bit of work to be done there. So the numbers will look great. So the Zaras of the world, the Takealots, there's all of those people will start to see that people are shopping more online, but the base of customers that we're talking about is small, very connected, and typically not representative of the massive sample. And over time, our big challenge is how do we bring the rest of the population, into that conversation? The second really cool opportunity is that because we're starting from a small base with a particular niche market, is that we haven't yet cracked mass market e-commerce solutions, right? There's people that are tinkering in that space. There's literally interesting companies trying to solve for last mile. All of that is happening, right? But I don't think it's been cracked yet. And that's why it's an amazing opportunity for people who've got the appetite to try and figure out how to solve for that within those spaces. So for me, I think e-commerce has got an amazing amount of potential in South Africa in particular. But I think we are right at the beginning of understanding actually how it works. I went to pick up a package the other day from the Bluebird Center at Takealot in Midrand, and I was blown away by this. I mean, I don't know who's been there before, but there's this like awesome like foofy slide thing that your package comes down, your name is displayed on this big board. They make you feel like super special. It was just like an experience. I was like, wow, I could do this. I could do this every day. And so if people are experiencing that and they're realizing, I mean, it was delivered within 24 hours, yada, yada, yada. So there's a lot of benefit in getting it right. So I think, yes, I think there's a lot of movement in that space, but I think it hasn't matured enough so that we can say it's an entirely applicable or accessible solution for the rest of the South African population. Firstly, I mean, it would be acknowledging that, things are rough. It's not an easy time to be an entrepreneur. It's not an easy time to be trying to figure out all these different problems that you have every single day. So I suppose the first thing is to acknowledge that, because ultimately, you could pay a lot of lip service to the fact that, things are going to be okay. You can make it, pivot. You can do all that. But the first thing and most importantly is that things are rough, right? And for those of us that understand what that means, I then encourage people to start thinking about, ways that they can use their core capabilities to find new opportunity. The reality of where we are, and there's a quote that I use when I do some of my talks, is that, there's a sharp bend in the road and we've kind of encountered it. And the only way it becomes dangerous is if you don't turn, right? If you don't turn, then you're going to crash and you're going to burn. So the reality is that how do you turn? And turning is also mental, but turning is physical. Like imagine you're driving a car. How do you navigate that? And so if you're not going to do anything, that is also a choice. Because that means that you're actually going to go and you're going to crash. If you're going to do something, you may not be sure about what you are doing, but you are doing something. And I think all the entrepreneurs that I've seen, some of them don't have all the answers, but they're like, we don't know what we're going to do, but we know we can't do what we've been doing, right? That's the reality. And so be very deliberate about that fact, and just start, like get something done. I spent some time with guys that were, in the event industry and they struggled, guys that ran restaurants and they've struggled. But it's the ones that have just tried something new, tried something different, that have found some value. I was also reading, just saying that, as entrepreneurs, the reality is that you have to do something. And not doing anything is also a choice. And not doing anything based on what you've been doing, is not going to get you to a better outcome. So trying something different and knowing that it doesn't work sooner is better than doing the same thing, And so, the companies that I've observed that have started to do things and get better results have taken that approach. I was referencing the Cape Peninsula Hotel in Cape Town that effectively has pivoted their entire business. They now have made available drive-through laundry service. They are now available their handymen to come and fix your house. They've now made so they've taken all their core services and they've deconstructed them, and now they're offering them to the public, right? That's doing something different. You could sit there as a hotel and say, oh, woe is me, one of the things is going to go back to normal, or you could deconstruct your service, understand your capability, and do something different. So that's the advice I would give to entrepreneurs. I think that's important for them to do something, and do something that's different from what you've been doing. So I mean, the theory that I have is that you have to think about your business as a living organism that has proficiency. And then you have
Yeah.
to think about your network as the depth of the relationships that you experience. So proficiency for me
Yeah.
is the ability to do something. So we all have proficiencies in what we do because someone pays us to do it. So you
Yeah.
and I can both play golf, but because I'm Tiger Woods, I'm more proficient at golf than you are, right? So in
Yeah.
the context of looking at golfers, there's still a difference in golfers. Similarly, you and I can be serving the same client. We can both be serving, a big government parastatal. But due to the nature of your relationship with that parastatal, you can get more equity and more value than I do. So
Gotcha.
proficiency and relationships have got range. And so
Mm.
it's important for businesses to start understanding those two things in relation to their pivot, because my theory is that that is the starting point of where you pivot from. And so if
Mm.
proficiency is the foot, relationship is the ground, you have to pivot off the foot and the ground being solid. And if you've got a
Got you.
shaky ground, which is your relationships, you break your leg when you pivot, right? That's
Yes,
that's the
that
theory.
makes sense.
So now you've understood proficiency and you've understood relationships. The big thing is to start thinking about the direction in which you pivot. And so the simple explanation is that there's a dance between customer discovery and customer validation that you
Yeah.
have to be doing before you actually realize that you have a customer to serve. And so
Yeah.
what that effectively means is spending time obsessing with the people that you serve. And the best way to do it, if you're in a big company, is literally take all the calls on the complaints hotline. You'll
Yeah.
find out a lot about your business. Or
Yeah.
spend time obsessing about what their problems are. Then when
Yeah.
you do that, you then validate that whatever their problem is, they're willing to pay for a solution. And when
Yes.
you do that dance back and forth, you get to a point where you realize that you can create a new business, and that's where the pivot comes in. Then you're moving
Got
in
you.
a different direction. So that's how to think about it.
Yeah.
So I built that. I built about 4 different models in the last 3 months. Because a lot of them have applied to my own businesses. As you start
Yeah.
going through these things, I've been trying to think through how I'm trying to approach them. I've been
Yeah.
trying to consider how it can be scaled to help people, do the same thing. So
Yeah.
I didn't create it for I'm an entrepreneur. It's something that I've been thinking about for a while, and fortunately, it seems to land and it seems to make a lot of sense for businesses.